The blood pooling beneath the unconscious man's torn buckskin shirt told Tessa Langford that she had maybe minutes to save his life, not hours. She pressed her apron against the deep gash across his ribs, her hands already slick with his blood as the autumn wind of 1877 howled through the canyon outside Seligman, Arizona. The mountain man had collapsed against her doorway, like a fallen oak, his massive frame too heavy for her to drag inside alone. His breathing so shallow, she had to press her ear to his chest to confirm his heart still beat. "Help me!" Tessa screamed toward the scattered buildings of the small settlement, but the wind swallowed her voice. The nearest neighbor was old Mr. Peterson, half deaf and a quarter-mile down the rocky path. She was alone with this dying stranger, and every second she wasted meant more blood soaking into the parched earth. Tessa had nursed her father through consumption before he died 2 years ago, had tended her mother through childbirth and fever before losing her too. At 23, she knew death's face intimately, could read it in the gray pallor creeping across this man's weathered features, in the blue tinge forming at his lips. She would not let death win this time. With strength born of desperation, she hooked her arms under his and pulled. He was easily 6'4" and built like he carved his living from solid stone. His shoulders were broader than any man she had ever seen, thick with muscle that even now, unconscious and dying, rippled beneath her grip. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, matted with dried blood and dirt. A week's worth of beard shadowed his strong jaw. Inch by inch, she dragged him across her threshold, his boots scraping twin trails in the dust. Her small cabin seemed to shrink with his presence. She shoved her kitchen table aside with her hip, sent her mending basket tumbling, and somehow maneuvered him onto the rag rug before her fireplace. The wound across his ribs was deep, made by a knife or possibly a bear's claw. Tessa could not tell which. But there was also a bullet hole in his left shoulder, crusted with old blood, maybe 2 days old. Whatever had happened to this man, he had fought hard to survive it. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency. She built up the fire, set water to boil, gathered her father's old medical supplies. Needle and thread, whiskey for cleaning wounds, clean cloth torn from her spare petticoat. Her fingers trembled only slightly as she cut away his ruined shirt, revealing a torso that looked hewn from granite, covered in old scars that spoke of a violent life. She cleaned the wounds, her stomach turning at the torn flesh, but her hands remained steady. The bullet had gone through his shoulder cleanly, at least. The rib wound required 23 careful stitches, her needle-piercing skin that seemed as tough as leather. He never stirred, not even when she poured whiskey directly into the wounds. That frightened her most of all. A man should react to such pain, even unconscious. His stillness spoke of how close to death's door he had wandered. For 3 days, the fever claimed him. He thrashed and muttered in delirium, words Tessa could not decipher, names she did not know. She sponged his burning skin with cool water, forced broth between his cracked lips, changed his bandages when they soaked through with blood and other fluids she tried not to examine too closely. She slept in her chair beside him, afraid that if she moved to her bed in the loft, he would slip away in the night. On the 4th morning, his eyes opened. They were the color of storm clouds over the distant mountains, gray with flecks of silver, and they fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled. Outside, a crow called. "You are in my home," Tessa said, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Outside Seligman. You collapsed at my door. You have been fevered for 3 days." His gaze moved slowly around the cabin, taking in the simple furnishings, the dried herbs hanging from the rafters, the medical supplies scattered across her trunk. When his eyes returned to her, something shifted in their depths. Recognition, perhaps, of how close he had come to dying. "Water," he rasped, the single word scraping from his throat like boots on gravel. She held a cup to his lips, supporting his head with her other hand. His hair was damp with sweat, softer than she expected. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin into his beard. When he finished, he fell back against the folded blankets she had placed beneath his head, his chest heaving from even that small exertion. "Thank you," he managed. His eyes closed, and for a panicked moment she thought he had slipped back into unconsciousness. But then he spoke again. "Name is Zachary Irving. Zach. Tessa Langford. You are welcome, Mr. Irving, though I would prefer my patients arrive at my door before they are half dead." The corner of his mouth twitched. It might have been the ghost of a smile. Then sleep claimed him again, but this time it was natural sleep, healing sleep, and Tessa finally allowed herself to believe he might survive. Over the following week, Zachary Irving proved to be the most stubborn patient Tessa had ever encountered. He insisted on sitting up before he should have, on eating solid food before his stomach could handle it, on attempting to stand when he could barely keep his eyes open for more than an hour. Each time she scolded him, he would look at her with those storm-gray eyes and grunt something that might have been agreement before doing exactly what he wanted anyway. "You will tear your stitches," she snapped on the 8th day when she found him propped against the wall, trying to pull on his boots with one hand while his other arm hung useless at his side. "Cannot stay in your way forever," he said. His voice had grown stronger, lost some of its rasp, revealed a deep timbre that seemed to resonate in her chest. "You have been kind. Too kind. I should move on. You should stay in bed. You lost enough blood to kill 3 men. Your shoulder wound is barely closed. If you walk out that door now, you will be dead before sunset." He looked up at her, and something in his expression made her take a step back. It was not anger exactly. It was more like a wild animal suddenly aware it had been caged. "I have survived worse. That does not mean you will survive this," Tessa said, but she softened her tone. She understood pride. She understood the need to stand on your own feet after being helpless. "Give it 3 more days. If you can walk from here to the well and back without collapsing, I will not stop you from leaving." Zachary studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. He let her help him back to his makeshift bed by the fire, though she could tell it grated against every instinct he possessed to accept her assistance. His arm around her shoulders was heavy, his weight substantial, even diminished by injury and fever. She could feel the hard muscle of his torso against her side, could smell leather and wood smoke and something else. Something wild that reminded her of the mountains themselves. That night, as she lay in her loft listening to him breathe, Tessa realized she did not want him to pass the test she had set. She did not want him to walk out her door and disappear into the wilderness. The thought should have alarmed her. She barely knew this man. He had not told her how he had been injured, who had shot him, what kind of life he led in those mountains. For all she knew, he was an outlaw, a murderer, someone running from justice. But when she looked at him, she did not see a criminal. She saw someone who had been alone for too long, someone who had forgotten what it meant to be cared for, to be worried over, to matter to another human being. She saw something of herself reflected in those guarded gray eyes. 3 days later, Zachary made the walk to the well and back. It took him 20 minutes, and he was white-faced and sweating by the end, but he did it. Tessa stood in her doorway and watched him complete the circuit, her heart sinking with each step he took. "You win," she said when he reached her again, though victory felt like ashes in her mouth. "You are strong enough to travel." Zachary looked at her for a long time. The late afternoon sun cast gold across the canyon walls behind him, caught in his dark hair and made his eyes seem lighter, almost luminous. "What if I do not want to leave?" The words hung between them like something fragile, like glass that would shatter if either of them moved too quickly. "You said you wanted to move on," Tessa managed. Her pulse hammered in her throat. "I said I could not stay in your way forever." He took a step closer. Despite his injuries, despite the lingering weakness, he seemed to fill her vision, solid and real and suddenly, terrifyingly important. "That is not the same thing as wanting to leave." "I do not understand." 2 weeks ago, I was alone in the mountains, bleeding out from wounds that should have killed me. I made it here on instinct, on pure, stubborn refusal to die alone in the dirt like an animal. His voice dropped lower, became almost rough with emotion. "You could have let me die on your doorstep. Would have been easier for you? Safer. But you dragged me inside. You stitched me up. You sat beside me for 3 days and 3 nights and fought to keep me alive, when you had no reason to care if I lived or died." "I could not just let you die," Tessa whispered. "Most people would have." He lifted his good hand, hesitated, then gently touched her cheek. His palm was calloused, warm, and Tessa found herself leaning into the contact before she could think better of it. Most people would have been afraid of a strange man showing up bleeding at their door, or they would have done the minimum and sent me on my way. But you treated me like I mattered, like my life had value. Tessa's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "Your life does have value. Then let me stay. Let me repay the debt I owe you. You owe me nothing. I owe you everything," Zachary said, and the fierce certainty in his voice made her breath catch. "I have been alone in those mountains for 5 years, Tessa, living more like a bear than a man. I forgot what it was like to have someone speak my name with kindness, to have someone care if I woke up in the morning. You reminded me. You brought me back from more than just death's edge. You brought me back to life." She should tell him to go. She should protect her heart, guard against the inevitable pain of letting someone in only to lose them. She had lost everyone she had ever loved. Her parents, her younger sister to scarlet fever, even Thomas, the boy she had planned to marry, dead from a mining accident before they could wed. She had learned to survive alone, learned to need no one. But as Zachary stood before her, his hand gentle against her face, his eyes holding hers with an openness that must have cost him dearly, Tessa found she could not say the words that would send him away. "What would you do if you stayed?" she asked instead. Relief washed across his features, subtle but unmistakable. "Whatever you need. I can hunt, bring in meat. I can repair your cabin. The roof needs work. The well needs shoring up. The corral fence is half falling down. I noticed these things while I was supposed to be resting." That ghost of a smile flickered across his mouth again. "I am good with my hands, good at fixing things, and I do not eat much." Despite herself, Tessa laughed. It felt strange, rusty like a skill she had nearly forgotten. "You ate 3 bowls of stew last night. I am recovering my strength. You are impossible. I am determined." He grew serious again, his hand falling away from her face, leaving her skin cold where his warmth had been. "I will not impose on you, Tessa. I can build a shelter for myself, stay separate from your home. I know it would not be proper for me to live here with you, would not be right. But I cannot leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Something kept me alive long enough to reach your door. I think I was meant to find you. Tessa wanted to dismiss such talk as fever dream nonsense, but she could not. She had felt it too, that sense of rightness, of pieces fitting together that she had not known were missing. This man, this stranger who was no longer quite a stranger, had become important to her in ways she did not fully understand. The old trapper's cabin, she heard herself say. About 100 yards west, near the creek. It has been abandoned for 2 years, but the structure is sound. You could stay there. Fix it up. The smile that broke across Zachary's face transformed him. It erased years of hard living, revealed a younger man beneath the weathered exterior, someone who had not quite forgotten how to hope. Thank you. Do not thank me yet. I expect payment for my medical services in the form of labor. That roof does need work, and the well, and the fence, and about a dozen other things I have been putting off because I lack the strength or skill to manage them myself. Consider it done. They stood there in the doorway as the sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The wind carried the scent of sage and juniper, and for the first time in longer than Tessa could remember, she did not feel alone. The following morning, Zachary moved into the old trapper's cabin. It took him most of the day, working slowly, favoring his shoulder. Tessa watched from her doorway as he hauled fallen branches away from the entrance, swept out years of accumulated dirt and debris, replaced broken window slats with new wood he cut from fallen timber nearby. He moved with the efficiency of a man accustomed to living rough, to making do with whatever materials were at hand. She told herself she was checking on him to ensure he did not overexert himself and reopen his wounds. She told herself it was simply practical to bring him lunch, to offer him use of her tools. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. She wanted to be near him. She wanted to watch the way sunlight caught in his dark hair, the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt as he worked, the way his face relaxed when he noticed her approaching. "You are staring," he said without turning around. He was nailing a new board across the doorframe, and the sound of the hammer echoed off the canyon walls. Tessa felt heat climb her cheeks. "I am observing, to make certain you are not doing damage to your injuries." "Is that so?" He turned then, and his eyes held amusement. "And what is your professional medical opinion?" "That you are working too hard too soon and will regret it tomorrow." "Probably." He set down the hammer and wiped sweat from his brow with his forearm. Even that simple gesture held a grace that made something flutter in Tessa's stomach. "But I have been useless for 2 weeks. Feels good to be productive again." She held out the cloth bundle she had brought. "I made extra biscuits, and there is dried apple." They sat together on the flat rock beside the creek, eating in comfortable silence. The water burbled over smooth stones. Birds called from the cottonwoods. It was peaceful in a way that made Tessa's chest ache with something she could not name. "Will you tell me what happened?" she asked after a while. "How you were injured." Zachary's jaw tightened. He stared at the water for a long moment before speaking. "I was hunting elk in the high country, about 30 miles north. Came across 3 men robbing a trader's wagon. The trader was dead. His wife was still alive, begging for her life. I could not." He paused, his hands curling into fists. "I could not walk away. So I interfered, shot one of them. The other 2 shot me in return and came at me with knives. I killed the second one. The third got that slash across my ribs before I put him down too." "You killed 3 men?" Tessa's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Yes." He looked at her then, his expression hard, waiting for judgment. "I am not a good man, Tessa. I have killed before. I will probably kill again. That is the reality of living out here, of surviving. If that frightens you, if you want me gone, say so now." Tessa considered his words carefully. She should be frightened. Nice girls from proper families did not associate with men who killed, who spoke of death as casually as others discussed the weather. But she had never been a nice girl from a proper family, not really. Her father had been a drunk who squandered what little money they had on cards and whiskey. Her mother had worked herself into an early grave, trying to hold their family together. Tessa had learned young that the world was not kind, that survival sometimes required hard choices. "You saved that woman's life," she said. "The traitors were already dead. The killers would have murdered you too if you had not defended yourself. I do not see a monster, Zachary. I see a man who stood up when others would have walked away." Some of the tension bled from his shoulders. Most people would not be so understanding. I am not most people. "No," he agreed softly. "You certainly are not." Their eyes held for a moment that stretched too long, became charged with something electric and dangerous. Tessa looked away first, her heart racing. She stood quickly, brushing crumbs from her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. "I should get back. I have mending to finish before dark." "Tessa." She stopped but did not turn around. She heard him rise, heard his boots on the rocky ground as he came to stand behind her. He did not touch her, but she could feel the heat of him. Could imagine if she leaned back even slightly, she would feel the solid wall of his chest. "Thank you. For understanding. For not being afraid of me." "I am not afraid of you," she said. And it was the truth. She was afraid of what she felt when he was near, afraid of how much she had come to depend on his presence in just a few short weeks. But she was not afraid of him. "Good," he murmured. And then she did feel his hand, gentle on her shoulder, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "That is good." The days fell into a rhythm. Zachary worked on his cabin and on the repairs to Tessa's property. He fixed her roof, replacing rotted shingles and sealing gaps where the wind had torn holes. He rebuilt the well housing, making it sturdy enough to last years. He mended the corral fence and built a new gate that swung smoothly on oiled hinges. In the evenings, he hunted, and he always brought a portion of whatever he killed to Tessa's door. Rabbit, turkey. Once, a young doe that provided meat for weeks. Tessa, in turn, tended his wounds as they healed. She changed his bandages, applied salve to the angry red scars, monitored for any sign of infection. She cooked meals that he shared at her table. And slowly, conversation became easier. He told her about his life in the mountains, about tracking animals through snow, about sleeping under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. She told him about her family, about the losses she had endured, about the loneliness of the past 2 years living alone in this isolated place. "Why stay?" he asked one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the canyon walls crimson. "You could go to Prescott, to Tucson, find work, find a community. You do not have to be alone out here." "This was my father's claim," Tessa said. "He bought this land, built this cabin. It is all I have left of my family. If I leave, I lose that. And besides," she hesitated, unsure how to put her feelings into words, "I am not good with crowds anymore. After losing everyone, after so much grief, I find I prefer the quiet, the solitude. You do not seem to mind my company." She glanced at him, caught the hint of vulnerability beneath his casual tone. "No," she admitted. "I do not mind your company at all." His hand found hers where it rested on the porch boards between them. His fingers were rough, scarred, but his touch was gentle. "I am glad." They sat like that until full dark, hands linked, not speaking, not needing to. The stars emerged one by one overhead. A cool breeze carried the scent of night-blooming flowers. And Tessa felt something inside her chest that had been frozen for years begin, tentatively, to thaw. But peace in the wild territories never lasted long. Trouble came to Seligman on a cold morning in late November, riding in on 3 horses and wearing guns low on their hips. Tessa was in town buying supplies at Peterson's general store when the men arrived. She recognized the look of them immediately. Drifters, troublemakers, the kind of men who took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake. Old Mr. Peterson saw it too. His hand moved toward the rifle he kept beneath the counter, but the leader of the 3 was faster. His gun cleared leather with practiced ease. "Now, that would be unfriendly," the man drawled. He was tall, lean, with cruel eyes and a smile that never reached them. "We are just here for supplies, and maybe some information." "We do not want trouble," Peterson said, his voice steady despite the gun pointed at his chest. "Then there will not be any." The man's gaze swept the store, landing on Tessa. His smile widened. "Well now, that is a pretty thing to find in the middle of nowhere." Tessa's skin crawled under his scrutiny, but she kept her expression neutral. "I am just here for flour and coffee, Mr. Peterson." "Woman up in the canyon, are you not?" The gunman continued, ignoring her attempt to dismiss him. "Living alone in that old cabin? Must get lonely." "I manage fine." "Bet you do." He took a step toward her. Tessa held her ground, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "Maybe my boys and I should ride up, check on you sometime. Make sure you are safe." "The lady said she manages fine." The voice came from the doorway, and Tessa's breath caught in her throat. Zachary filled the entrance, and he looked nothing like the wounded man who had collapsed at her door 6 weeks ago. He stood at his full height now, broad-shouldered and powerfully built, his presence seeming to expand to fill the small store. His hand rested on the rifle he carried, his posture deceptively relaxed. But Tessa could see the coiled tension in him, could read the deadly intent in his storm-gray eyes. The gunman assessed this new threat, his smile faltering slightly. "And you are?" "Someone telling you to move along." "Is that so?" The gunman's companions shifted, their hands moving toward their own weapons. The air in the store grew thick with impending violence. "Zachary, do not," Tessa said, her voice low and urgent. She moved toward him, placed herself between him and the gunman. "It is not worth it." His gaze flicked to her, softened fractionally. "Go outside, Tessa." "No." "Tessa." "I said no." She turned to face the gunman, lifting her chin. "Take your supplies if you must, but then leave. There's nothing else for you here." The leader studied them both for a long moment. Tessa could see the calculation in his eyes, weighing the odds, deciding if the potential fight was worth the trouble. Finally, he shrugged and holstered his weapon. "Just supplies, then. For now." He gathered flour, coffee, and jerky, tossing coins on the counter that probably were not enough to cover the cost. As he passed Tessa on his way to the door, he leaned in close enough that she could smell whiskey on his breath. "See you around, pretty thing." Then they were gone, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. Tessa's legs suddenly felt weak, and she gripped the edge of Peterson's counter for support. "Those men are trouble," Peterson said grimly. "Someone should ride to Prescott. Get the law out here." "That is 3 days each way," Zachary said. "They could burn down half the territory before help arrived." He looked at Tessa, and she saw fear in his eyes, raw and undisguised. "You are coming home with me. Now. I need to get my supplies. Now, Tessa." He did not raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. "Those men will come looking for you. I know their kind, and I will not leave you unprotected." Part of Tessa wanted to argue, to insist she could take care of herself. But the truth was, she was frightened. The way that gunman had looked at her, the promise in his words, made her stomach turn with dread. "All right," she said quietly. They gathered her supplies quickly. Zachary stayed close to her side and the entire walk back to her cabin, his rifle ready, his eyes scanning the landscape constantly. When they reached her home, he went through every room, checking windows, testing locks, ensuring no one had been there in their absence. "Pack a bag," he said. "Enough for a few days. You are staying at my cabin." "Zachary, that would not be proper." "I do not give a damn about proper." His voice was harsh, strained. He crossed to her, gripped her shoulders with both hands. "Those men will come back. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, but they will come. And this cabin is too isolated, too vulnerable. My cabin is better positioned, has better sight lines. I can defend it. I can defend you, but only if you are there. You are still healing?" "I am healed enough." His grip tightened, not painful but desperate. "Please, Tessa, do not fight me on this. I cannot—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "I cannot lose you. Do you understand? I will not lose you." Tessa looked up into his face and saw a fear that mirrored her own. But beneath it, she saw something else. Something fierce and possessive and utterly devoted. This man, who had been alone in the mountains for 5 years, who had forgotten how to let people in, who guarded his heart like a fortress, he was opening that fortress for her. He was laying himself bare. "All right," she whispered. "I will pack." She threw clothes and necessities into a canvas bag with shaking hands. Zachary gathered her father's rifle and ammunition, what food she had stored, her medical supplies. They locked her cabin and made the short walk to his shelter as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Zachary's cabin was small, just one room with a fireplace and a rough-hewn bed he had built himself. It smelled of wood smoke and leather and him. He set her bag in the corner, then immediately began checking his ammunition, cleaning his rifle, preparing for the confrontation he seemed certain would come. Tessa watched him work, watched the hard set of his jaw, the controlled violence in his movements. This was the man who had killed 3 robbers to save a stranger. This was the mountain man, the predator, the survivor. And he was preparing to fight for her. "What will you do if they come?" she asked. Zachary did not look up from his rifle. "Whatever I have to. I do not want you to kill for me." Now he did look up, and his eyes blazed. "Then you should have let me die on your doorstep. Because the moment you saved my life, the moment you sat beside me for 3 days and nights, the moment you looked at me like I was worth saving you became mine to protect. And I will kill every man who tries to hurt you. I will burn down this whole God-forsaken territory if that is what it takes to keep you safe." The words should have frightened her. They were primitive, possessive, spoken with an intensity that bordered on savage. But instead, Tessa felt something ignite in her chest, something hot and fierce that matched his own. "I am not yours, Whit," she said. But there was no heat in the words. They sounded weak even to her own ears. "Are you not?" Zachary set down his rifle and stood, crossing to her in 3 long strides. He cupped her face in both hands, his calloused palms rough against her skin, and looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Tell me you have not felt this thing between us. Tell me you have not lain awake at night, thinking of me the way I think of you. Tell me, Tessa." She could not, because she had felt it, this pull, this connection that went deeper than gratitude or proximity or simple attraction. She had lain awake in her loft, listening to the wind, and wondering if he was asleep in his cabin or if he too was staring at the darkness, thinking of her. "I have felt it," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then let me protect you. Let me—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I have been alone so long, I forgot how to want anything beyond survival. But you made me want more. You made me want a future. Made me want—" His thumb stroked her cheekbones, a gesture so tender it made her eyes sting. "Made me want you. Zachary. I know it is too soon. I know you barely know me. But when a man comes as close to death as I did, when he is given a second chance, he does not waste time pretending. I want you, Tessa Langford. Want you in every way a man can want a woman. Want to wake up beside you, want to protect you, want to build a life with you. And if you tell me I am being a fool, that I am moving too fast, I will step back. I will give you time. But I will not lie about what I feel." Tessa's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Everything in her life had taught her to be cautious, to guard her heart, to expect loss and pain. But looking at Zachary, seeing the raw honesty in his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hands against her skin, she found she did not want to be cautious. She wanted to be reckless. She wanted to leap. "You are not a fool," she said. "Or if you are, then so am I. Because I want you too." The kiss was inevitable. His mouth found hers with a hunger that took her breath away, fierce and demanding and somehow still gentle, aware of her inexperience, her hesitation. Tessa had been kissed before, chaste pecks from Thomas that had been pleasant but forgettable. This was nothing like those innocent touches. This was fire and need, and a connection so intense it frightened her even as she melted into it. Her hands found his chest, felt the solid muscle beneath his shirt, the rapid beating of his heart that matched her own. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against him, and she could feel every inch of his powerful body. Could feel the restraint it cost him to keep the kiss controlled, to not take more than she was ready to give. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks." "Only weeks?" Tessa's voice came out breathless. "I have wanted it since the first time you opened your eyes and looked at me." He laughed, the sound surprised and delighted. Then he kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a claim. "We should stop," he murmured against her lips, "before I forget myself entirely." Reluctantly, Tessa agreed. They separated, though not far. She sat on his bed while he returned to preparing his weapons. But now the tension in the cabin had changed. It was charged with awareness, with anticipation, with the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted between them. Night fell. Night. They ate cold biscuits and dried meat, not wanting to light a fire that would announce their presence. Zachary positioned himself by the window, rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the darkness. Tessa tried to read by candlelight, but found she could not focus on the words. She kept glancing at him, at the hard line of his profile, the dangerous grace in the way he held himself ready for violence. "Sleep," he said without looking at her. "I will keep watch. I cannot sleep while you stand guard. Then we will both have a long night." Hours passed. The moon rose, casting silver light across the canyon. Coyotes sang their eerie chorus. The wind rattled the window shutters, but no gunman appeared. Around midnight, Tessa could no longer fight exhaustion. She lay down on Zachary's bed, fully clothed, and tried to rest. The last thing she remembered before sleep claimed her was the solid comfort of his presence, the knowledge that he was watching over her, that she was safe. She woke to the sound of horses. Dawn had just begun to lighten the eastern sky, turning it from black to deep blue. Zachary was at the window, his body tense, his rifle ready. He glanced at her as she sat up. "3 riders," he said quietly, "approaching from the south. It is them." Tessa's mouth went dry. She moved to stand beside him, looked out through the gap in the shutters. Sure enough, 3 silhouettes were visible against the gradually brightening landscape, heading directly for the cabin. "What do we do?" "You stay here. Stay low, away from the windows. No matter what you hear, do not come outside." He checked his rifle, his pistol, his knife. Every movement was precise, controlled, the actions of a man preparing for battle. "Zachary, maybe we can talk to them. Maybe." "There's no talking to men like that, Tessa. They came here for violence. They came here for you, and I will not let them have you." He kissed her once, hard and fast, then slipped out the door before she could protest. Tessa rushed to the window, pressed her face to the gap in the shutters, her heart in her throat. The 3 riders drew rein about 50 yards from the cabin. The leader, the man from the store, called out, "We are just here to talk." "Then talk from there." Zachary's voice rang clear in the morning air. He stood in front of the cabin, seemingly relaxed. But Tessa could see the coiled readiness in him. "Where is the woman? The pretty one from yesterday?" "None of your concern." "See, that is where you are wrong." The gunman dismounted, his companions following suit. "We rode all the way out here just to see her. Be unfriendly not to let us say hello. You have until I count to 3 to get back on those horses and ride out. After that, I start shooting." The gunman laughed, but it sounded forced. Big talk for one man facing 3. "1. You know who we are? We ride with the Carson gang. You kill us, the whole gang will come looking for blood. 2. You are making a mistake, friend. 3. Zachary's rifle came up in one smooth motion. The crack of the shot echoed off the canyon walls. The leader stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming between his fingers. His companions went for their guns, but Zachary was already moving, diving behind the water trough as bullets chewed into the wood. Tessa's scream died in her throat. She wanted to help, wanted to do something, but she had no clear shot and no experience with gunfights. All she could do was watch in horror as Zachary engaged in a deadly dance with 2 armed men. But the mountain man fought like his life depended on it, because her life depended on it. He moved with brutal efficiency, using cover, making every shot count. His second bullet took down one of the gunmen. The third man tried to flank him, got around the side of the cabin, and Tessa realized with cold terror that he would have a clear shot at Zachary's back. She did not think. She grabbed her father's rifle, threw open the cabin door, and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her over, and she had no idea if she hit anything. But it was enough. The gunman spun toward this new threat, And that moment of distraction was all Zachary needed. His third shot found its mark. Silence fell, broken only by the ringing in Tessa's ears and the harsh sound of her own breathing. 3 bodies lay in the dirt. The leader was still alive, crawling toward his horse, leaving a trail of blood. Zachary walked over and kicked the man's gun away. "You should have left when you had the chance," Zachary said, his voice cold. The gunman spat blood. "Carson will kill you for this. Let him try." Then Zachary turned and strode to Tessa, who still stood frozen in the doorway. He took the rifle from her shaking hands and gathered her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You were supposed to stay inside," he said. But there was no anger in his voice, only relief. "He was going to shoot you." "I know. You saved my life." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, smoothed her hair back with a hand that trembled slightly. "Seems we are even now." Tessa started to laugh and found she could not stop, the sound verging on hysterical. Zachary held her through it, murmuring soothing words, anchoring her until the laughter turned to tears and then finally to silence. "What do we do now?" she asked when she could speak again. Zachary looked at the bodies, his jaw tight. "I will take them to Seligman. Report what happened. It was self-defense. There are witnesses who saw them threaten you yesterday, but—" He paused. "The Carson gang is real. If these men were truly part of it, there may be more trouble coming. Then we face it together." He cupped her face, his expression fierce. "I should leave. Should ride out and draw them away from you, keep you safe. If you leave, I am coming with you." "Tessa, I mean it, Zachary. You do not get to make that choice for me. We face this together, or we face nothing at all." For a moment she thought he would argue. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met." "Good. You need someone stubborn. Otherwise you would do something heroically stupid and get yourself killed." Despite everything, he smiled. "Cannot have that. Not when I finally found a reason to stay alive." They spent the morning dealing with the aftermath. Zachary loaded the bodies onto the horses, while Tessa cleaned blood from the cabin steps, her hand steady despite the roiling in her stomach. By noon, they were ready to ride into Seligman. Mr. Peterson and several other townspeople listened to Zachary's account of the shooting. The wounded leader, who survived the journey into town, confirmed the story through gritted teeth before being locked in the small jail cell Seligman used for occasional troublemakers. "Those Carson boys are bad news," Peterson said grimly. "This is not over." "I know," Zachary replied. "But they brought the fight to us. We finished it." That night, back at the cabin, Tessa lay in Zachary's arms in his narrow bed. They had not done more than kiss, both too shaken by the violence of the morning. But she needed the comfort of his presence, needed to feel his heart beating strong and steady beneath her ear. "Tell me about your life before the mountains," she said quietly. Zachary was silent for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he began to speak, his voice a low rumble in his chest. "I had a wife, a farm in Kansas. We were young, too young probably. I was 20, she was 18. We thought we could build a life together, thought love was enough." He paused, his hand stilling where it had been stroking her hair. "Raiders came one night, burned the farm, killed her. I tried to stop them, but there were too many. They beat me near to death and left me in the ashes. When I woke up, everything was gone. I had nothing left, no reason to stay. So I came west into the mountains, and I stayed there. Figured if I was alone, I could not lose anyone again." Tessa's eyes stung with tears for the young man he had been, for the loss he had endured. What was her name? Sarah. His arms tightened around her. Her name was Sarah, and I loved her, but... He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. What I feel for you is different. Stronger. Maybe because I am older now. Maybe because I know how precious this is, how easily it can be taken away. Or maybe it is just you, Tessa. Maybe you are different from anyone I have ever known. I am not special. You are wrong. He shifted, tilting her face up so he could look into her eyes. You are the strongest person I have met. You survived losing everyone you loved. You built a life alone in the middle of nowhere. You did not hesitate to drag a dying stranger into your home, to fight for his life when giving up would have been easier. And when danger came, you did not hide. You stood beside me. You saved me. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. You are everything, Tessa. Everything I did not know I was looking for. She kissed him then, poured everything she could not put into words into that kiss. Gratitude and desire and fear and hope all tangled together. Zachary responded with matching intensity, his big hands gentle on her body, despite the passion she could feel thrumming through him. Marry me, he said against her mouth. Tessa pulled back, certain she had misheard. What? Marry me. He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. I know it is fast. I know you probably think I am insane. But I am 32 years old, Tessa. I have been alone for 7 years. I have survived things that should have killed me. And I know what I want. I want you. I want to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of my life. I want the right to protect you, to provide for you, to call you mine in every way that matters. So marry me. Tessa's heart hammered wildly. Every practical bone in her body said this was too fast, too soon, too reckless. They had known each other for less than 2 months. But the truth was, she knew Zachary better than she had known Thomas after 2 years of courtship. She knew his heart, had seen him at his most vulnerable, had witnessed his strength and his gentleness and his fierce devotion. Yes, she heard herself say, yes, I will marry you. The smile that lit his face was like sunrise, brilliant and warm and full of promise. He kissed her until they were both breathless, until the world narrowed to just the two of them, to this moment, to this impossible, reckless, perfect thing they were choosing. They married 3 days later in Seligman, with Mr. Peterson standing as witness and the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through performing the brief ceremony. Tessa wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her frame. Zachary wore clean clothes and had trimmed his beard, though his hair still fell past his shoulders, wild and untamed as the mountains he called home. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, when Zachary kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak, Tessa felt something inside her click into place. This was right. This was what she had been waiting for, without knowing she was waiting. This man, this mountain man who had stumbled dying into her life, was her future. They spent their wedding night in Tessa's cabin, which now belonged to both of them. Zachary carried her over the threshold, laughing at her protests that she was perfectly capable of walking. He set her down carefully in the middle of the room, and suddenly the laughter died, replaced by an awareness that made the air thick and electric. I have never... Tessa started, then stopped, feeling heat climb her cheeks. I mean, Thomas and I, we were waiting until marriage, and then he died, so I know. Zachary cupped her face, his storm gray eyes soft with understanding. We do not have to do anything tonight. I can sleep by the fire. We have time. But Tessa did not want him to sleep by the fire. She had been alone for too long, had guarded her heart too carefully, had denied herself too much. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to claim this happiness before the world could take it away. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Teach me. Show me what it means to be your wife." Zachary's restraint broke with a groan. He kissed her deeply, his hands tangling in her hair. And then he was lifting her, carrying her to the loft where her bed waited. He laid her down like she was precious, like she was fragile, and proceeded to worship every inch of her with a reverence that made her weep. He was gentle despite his strength, patient despite his obvious desire, taking his time to show her pleasure she had not known existed. And when they finally came together, when he made her truly his wife in every sense, Tessa understood what it meant to be whole. To be connected to another person so completely that you could not tell where one ended and the other began. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Zachary held her close and whispered promises against her hair, promises to always protect her, to cherish her, to love her until his last breath. Tessa believed every word. Winter came to the Arizona territory, bringing cold nights and occasional dustings of snow to the higher elevations. Zachary and Tessa settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. He hunted and trapped, bringing in meat and pelts they could sell in Seligman. She tended the small garden she managed to coax from the rocky soil, preserved food for the lean months, took in occasional mending work from townspeople. They were not wealthy, but they were content, more than content, happy in a way that felt almost dangerous, like tempting fate to notice their joy and snatch it away. The threat of the Carson gang hung over them like a storm cloud that never quite broke. The wounded gunman in Seligman's jail was eventually transported to Prescott to stand trial, but no revenge-seeking outlaws materialized. Weeks turned to months, and gradually, Tessa began to believe they might actually be safe. Spring arrived in an explosion of wildflowers that turned the canyon into a tapestry of color. Tessa discovered she was pregnant in early April, and the news sent Zachary into a panic that would have been comical if it had not been so touching. "You need a real doctor," he insisted, pacing their small cabin like a caged mountain lion. "We should move to Prescott or Tucson, somewhere with proper medical care." "I have delivered babies before," Tessa said patiently. She sat at the table, mending one of his shirts, outwardly calm, even though her heart sang with joy. "I know what to expect, and Mrs. Henderson in Seligman is an experienced midwife. I will be fine. You do not know that. Childbirth is dangerous. Women die. I cannot—" His voice cracked. "I cannot lose you, Tessa. I cannot go through that again." She set down her mending and went to him, wrapped her arms around his waist, and held him until some of the tension left his powerful frame. "You will not lose me. I am strong, and I have you to take care of me. That is more than most women have." He buried his face in her hair, his arms crushing her against him. "I will take care of you. I swear it. You and the baby. I will keep you both safe." Zachary became absurdly protective as her belly began to swell. He refused to let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest constantly, hovered over her like she might break at any moment. It drove Tessa to distraction and filled her heart with so much love she thought it might burst. "I am not made of glass," she protested one afternoon when he snatched a water bucket from her hands. "You are carrying my child. You will let me help you, or I will tie you to a chair." "You would not dare." He grinned, that rare, brilliant smile that transformed his face. Try me." In the end, she let him coddle her because she understood the fear that drove it. He had lost his first wife, had lived with that trauma for years. Of course, he was terrified of history repeating itself. So she rested when he insisted, ate the enormous meals he prepared, and allowed him to do the heavy work around their homestead. Summer brought punishing heat to the desert, but also news from Seligman. The Carson gang had been destroyed in a shootout with law enforcement in New Mexico. The leader was dead. The remaining members were scattered or imprisoned. The threat that had hung over them for months was finally, truly gone. "We are safe," Tessa said that night as they sat on their porch, watching the stars emerge. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick and tumble. "We can finally breathe." Zachary's hand covered hers, his palm warm against the taut skin. "I never thought I would have this. A home, a wife, a child on the way. After Sarah died, I thought this part of my life was over, that I would die alone in those mountains." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were suspiciously bright. "You gave me back my life, Tessa. Gave me a future worth living. I will never be able to repay that debt." "There is no debt," she said softly. "Just love. Just two people who found each other when they both needed found. That is enough." "It is everything," he corrected, and kissed her with a sweetness that made her ache. Their son was born in October, during the first cool snap of autumn. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Zachary thought he might lose his mind from fear and helplessness. He paced outside the cabin while Mrs. Henderson and two other women from Seligman attended Tessa, his hands clenched into fists, his heart screaming prayers to a God he had stopped believing in years ago. When the baby's cry finally pierced the air, when Mrs. Henderson emerged with a smile and told him he had a healthy son and a healthy wife, Zachary's knees nearly gave out with relief. Tessa looked exhausted when he rushed to her side, but she was smiling, and in her arms was the smallest, most perfect thing he had ever seen. A boy with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved aimlessly in the air. "Meet your son," Tessa said, her voice hoarse but filled with joy. Zachary reached out with trembling hands and took the baby, cradling the impossibly light weight against his broad chest. The boy opened his eyes, and Zachary looked into gray irises that mirrored his own and felt something fundamental shift in his soul. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are both perfect." They named him James, after Tessa's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged, and he transformed their lives in ways both exhausting and wonderful. Zachary, who had faced down outlaws and grizzly bears without flinching, was terrified of this tiny creature. He held James like the boy might shatter, changed diapers with exaggerated care, and spent hours simply watching his son sleep. "You are going to spoil him," Tessa said one evening, watching Zachary rock the baby for the third time that night. "Let me," he replied. "I missed so much time with Sarah. We never had children. I will not take a single moment of this for granted." Tessa understood. She understood better than anyone the preciousness of what they had built together. A family, a home, a life carved from loss and loneliness into something beautiful. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons. James grew from infant to toddler to a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, wanted to learn everything Zachary could teach him about hunting and tracking and surviving in the wild. At 4 years old, he could already recognize animal tracks, could move through the forest with surprising quiet for such a young child. When James was 5, Tessa became pregnant again. This time Zachary was calmer, his fear tempered by the knowledge that his wife was strong, that she had survived once and would survive again. Their daughter was born in the spring, and they named her Grace. She had her mother's delicate features and her father's storm-gray eyes. And from the moment she entered the world, she had both her parents wrapped around her tiny finger. Watching Zachary with their daughter was almost comical. The mountain man who had killed grown men without hesitation turned into absolute putty when Grace smiled at him. He made her toys from carved wood, sang her lullabies in his rough voice, let her pull his long hair and smear mud on his face without complaint. "You are hopeless," Tessa teased one afternoon, finding him on the floor playing dolls with their 3-year-old daughter while James tried to show them both a frog he had caught. "Completely," Zachary agreed, grinning up at her with such open happiness that Tessa's heart clenched. This man, this beautiful, damaged, wonderful man, had healed. The haunted look that had lived in his eyes when she first met him was gone, replaced by peace. When James was 10 and Grace was 5, they made the decision to expand their homestead. Zachary built a larger cabin with 3 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. He dug a better well, built a barn for the horses and the cow they had acquired, fenced in a larger garden area for Tessa's vegetables. Seligman had grown over the years as well. What had been a scattered collection of buildings was now a proper town with a school, a church, a bank, and a sheriff. Tessa's children attended school during the winter months, though they still learned more practical skills from their father during the rest of the year. Life was good, better than good. It was everything Tessa had never dared to dream of during those lonely years after her family died. She had a husband who loved her fiercely, children who were healthy and happy, a community of friends and neighbors. She had built something lasting from the ashes of her grief. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary took Tessa riding up into the mountains. They left the children with Mrs. Henderson and spent 2 days camping under the stars. Just the 2 of them, like it had been in the early days. "Do you ever miss it?" Tessa asked as they lay together in their bedroll, the fire burning low nearby. "The solitude? The freedom of living alone in the wild?" Zachary was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. No worries beyond survival. But I would not trade what we have for anything. You, the children, our home, that is freedom. That is life. What I had before was just existing." "I am glad you stumbled onto my doorstep that day," Tessa said softly. "Bleeding and half dead. Best thing that ever happened to me." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Only you would say that. Most people would call it a nightmare." "Most people are not me. Thank God for that." He rolled over, propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her. The firelight caught in his eyes, turned them molten silver. "I love you, Tessa Irving. I loved you from the moment I opened my eyes and saw you looking at me like my life mattered. I will love you until I draw my last breath and probably beyond that." Tears pricked her eyes. After 10 years, he could still make her cry with his words, with the raw honesty he offered her. "I love you too. Always." They made love under the stars, slow and sweet and familiar, 2 people who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. Afterward, as Tessa drifted toward sleep in the safety of her husband's arms, she thought about how far they had both come. 2 damaged people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life from nothing but determination and love. The years continued to pass. James grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, with the same quiet intensity and skill in the wilderness. Grace became a spirited girl who could ride and shoot as well as her brother, though she also loved books and learning. Zachary and Tessa watched their children grow with pride and a bittersweet awareness that childhood was fleeting. When James was 16, he began courting the daughter of a rancher who had settled near Seligman. Zachary gave his son advice about women, about respect and patience, and the importance of choosing a partner who was your equal. Tessa watched the conversations with amusement, remembering the mountain man who had once been so rough around the edges, who had learned gentleness from her. They will get married, Tessa predicted one evening as she and Zachary sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of crimson and gold. Within 2 years, I would wager. Probably, Zachary agreed. He reached over and took her hand, their fingers interlacing automatically after so many years. Makes me feel old. You are not old. You are seasoned. He snorted. Seasoned. I like that. Makes me sound like a good cut of meat. You are a very good cut of meat, Tessa said solemnly, then laughed at his expression. Even after all these years, she could still surprise him, still make him grin like a boy. Their peaceful life was interrupted one final time, when Tessa was 46 and Zachary was 55. A young man arrived at their homestead, dusty from travel, claiming to be Zachary's nephew. His name was Samuel, and he was the son of Zachary's older brother, whom Zachary had not seen since leaving Kansas 25 years earlier. Your brother is dying, Samuel said bluntly. Consumption. He asked me to find you, to tell you he wants to see you one more time before he passes, to make amends. Zachary's face went carefully blank, the way it did when he was processing difficult emotions. I have not spoken to David in decades. We parted on bad terms. He knows. He regrets it. He just wants a chance to say goodbye. Samuel looked between Zachary and Tessa. I know it is a lot to ask, but family is family. That night, after Samuel had been given dinner and a place to sleep in the barn, Tessa and Zachary talked. Do you want to go? Tessa asked. I do not know. Zachary stared into the fire, his jaw tight. David blamed me for Sarah's death, said I should have protected her better, should have seen the raiders coming. We fought. I left. I never looked back. But he is reaching out now, asking for forgiveness. Do you think you can give it to him? Zachary was silent for a long time. Then he looked at her, and she saw the man she had nursed back from death's edge, the man who had been so damaged and alone. You taught me about second chances, Tessa. You gave me one when I did not deserve it. How can I refuse to do the same for my brother? 2 weeks later, they made the journey to Kansas with Samuel as their guide. It was Tessa's first time leaving Arizona in over 20 years, and she marveled at how the landscape changed as they traveled east. The children stayed behind with Mrs. Henderson, old enough now to be trusted for a few weeks. Zachary's brother lived on a small farm outside Dodge City, struggling to make ends meet while consumption slowly consumed him from within. When the brothers saw each other for the first time in a quarter century, there was a long, awkward moment. Then David stepped forward and embraced Zachary, and Tessa saw her husband's rigid control crack. I am sorry, David said, his voice weak and raspy. I was wrong to blame you. Sarah's death was not your fault. I was just angry, needed someone to hold responsible. I have regretted it every day since. I am sorry too, Zachary replied. I should have stayed, should have helped you rebuild. I ran instead. You survived. That is what matters. David pulled back, studying his younger brother's face. You look good, Zach. Healthy, happy. You found a life. I found her, Zachary said, turning to draw Tessa forward. My wife, Tessa. She saved me in more ways than one. David smiled at Tessa. "Thank you for taking care of my stubborn brother. I know he cannot be easy to live with. He has his moments," Tessa said diplomatically, making both men laugh. They stayed for 2 weeks, helping where they could, getting to know Samuel and David's other children. Tessa could see the healing happening in Zachary, the closure he had not known he needed. When David died peacefully in his sleep one night near the end of their stay, Zachary grieved. But there was peace in the grief. He had said his goodbyes. He had made his peace. There were no regrets left between them. On the journey home, Zachary was quieter than usual. Tessa did not push him to talk, simply stayed close, let him process in his own time. Finally, as they made camp one night under a canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch, he spoke. "Thank you for coming with me, for supporting me through that. Of course, where you go, I go. That is what marriage means." He pulled her close, tucked her against his side in their shared bedroll. "I keep thinking about how different my life could have been if I had not been shot that day, if I had not made it to your cabin, if you had not dragged me inside. I would have died alone in those mountains, bitter and empty and forgotten. Instead, I have you. I have our children. I have a life worth living. You would have found your way eventually." "No," he said with certainty. "I was lost, Tessa. Completely lost. You found me. You saved me. Not just my life, but my soul. I know I've told you this before, but I need you to know I still feel it every day. Gratitude, wonder, love so big it scares me sometimes." Tessa turned in his arms, kissed him with all the love she felt in return. "You saved me too, you know. I was so alone, so convinced I would spend the rest of my life that way. Then you walked into my life, and suddenly I had a reason to wake up in the morning. Purpose, hope, joy. We saved each other, Zachary. That is the truth of it." They held each other as the stars wheeled overhead. Two people who had been broken and alone, finding wholeness in each other's arms. When they returned to Arizona, their children rushed out to greet them, and Zachary swept both James and Grace into his arms, despite the fact that they were far too big for such treatment. They were home. They were together. They were complete. The final years of their story unfolded with the quiet beauty of a well-lived life. James did indeed marry his sweetheart and built his own homestead 5 miles from his parents. He and his wife gave Zachary and Tessa 3 grandchildren who visited often, filling the house with laughter and chaos. Grace grew into a teacher, taking over the school in Seligman when the previous teacher retired. And she married a gentleman who worked at the general store. Zachary's hair went gray, then white, but he remained strong, still hunting and working their land well into his 60s. Tessa's face showed the lines of age, but her hands remained steady, her mind sharp, her love for her husband as fierce as it had been the day she married him. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a celebration in Seligman. The whole town turned out, testament to the respect and affection the community held for the couple. There were speeches and food and music, and at the end of the night, Zachary pulled Tessa onto the makeshift dance floor and waltzed her around while everyone clapped and cheered. "Still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," he murmured into her ear. "Still the biggest liar I have ever met," she replied. But she was smiling. "Not a lie. Never a lie when it comes to you." They danced until they were both breathless and laughing, surrounded by the life they had built, the family they had created, the love they had nurtured for 3 decades. Later, as they rode home in the wagon with the stars bright overhead, Tessa leaned against Zachary's shoulder and thought about the young woman she had been, dragging a dying stranger into her cabin. That woman had been so afraid, so scarred by loss, so convinced she would never again risk her heart. Thank God she had been wrong. Thank God for mountain men who refused to die. Thank God for second chances and stubborn love, and the courage to reach out when it would have been easier to stay alone. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked, feeling her shift against him. "Everything," Tessa said. "Nothing. How lucky I am. How grateful." "Me too," he said simply. "Every single day." "Me too." They rode home through the night. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had built a life from nothing but determination and love, who had proven that even broken people can heal if they find the right person to help piece them back together. Many years later, when Zachary was 78 and Tessa was 69, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of fire and gold. It was a daily ritual now, this quiet time together at the end of the day. Their children visited often. Their grandchildren were grown with families of their own, and they had even been blessed with a few great-grandchildren who treated them like living legends. "Do you remember the day we met?" Tessa asked, her hand clasped in Zachary's. "Every detail," he replied. "You had blood on your apron. You were the most terrifying, beautiful thing I had ever seen. I thought maybe I had died, and you were some kind of angel come to carry me to the afterlife. I was definitely not an angel. I was cursing you for being so heavy while I dragged you inside." He laughed, the sound as warm and rich as it had been when he was younger. "Best day of my life. The day I stumbled onto your doorstep and you refused to let me die." "Best day of my life, too," Tessa admitted, though I did not know it at the time. I was too busy trying to keep you alive to realize you would end up being everything I needed. "Do you have any regrets?" Zachary asked, his thumb stroking over her knuckles in a gesture so familiar it was like breathing. "Things you wish had been different?" Tessa considered the question seriously. She thought about the losses she had endured, the hardships they had faced, the lean years and the difficult times. But when she weighed all of that against what she had gained, there was no contest. "Not a single one," she said firmly. "Every moment, good and bad, led me here, to you, to this life. How could I regret any of it?" "You are remarkable," Zachary said, his voice thick with emotion even after all these years. "I have never stopped being amazed by you. Your strength, your capacity for love, your refusal to give up on me or on us or on anything. We have been good for each other," Tessa said simply. "Two broken pieces that fit together perfectly, made something whole." As the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to emerge, they sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, hearts beating in synchrony after decades of partnership. Their story had begun with blood and death and desperate salvation. It had been forged through danger and doubt and the slow building of trust. It had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. Zachary died peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 80. Tessa was beside him when he took his last breath, holding his hand, whispering words of love and gratitude. Though her heart broke with his passing, she took comfort in knowing they had been blessed with an extraordinary life together, far more years than either of them had expected when they first met. She lived another 5 years without him, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the legacy of the love she and Zachary had shared. She spent her final years telling their story to anyone who would listen, wanting the younger generations to understand that true love was not something that just happened. It was built through choice and commitment and the daily decision to show up for each other, even when it was hard. When Tessa died at the age of 76, she was buried beside Zachary on a hill overlooking their homestead, beneath a sky so vast and blue it seemed to go on forever. Their children placed a single marker for both of them, with an inscription that read, "Zachary and Tessa Irving, two souls who found each other at death's edge and chose to build a life worth living, forever together." Their story became part of the mythology of Seligman, told and retold until it took on the quality of legend. The mountain man and the woman who saved him. The nurse who refused to let her patient walk away. The love that grew from desperate circumstances into something eternal. But for those who had known them, who had witnessed their partnership firsthand, there was nothing mythological about it. It was simply the story of two people who had been given a second chance and had seized it with both hands, who had refused to let fear or loss or loneliness win, who had chosen each other every single day and built something beautiful from that choice. In the end, that was the truth of Zachary and Tessa Irving. Not a fairy tale, but something better. A real love, hard-won and carefully tended, that had lasted a lifetime and beyond. The kind of love that changed everyone it touched, that proved even in the harsh wilderness of the Old West, even in the face of violence and hardship and loss, hope could survive, love could flourish, and broken people could heal, if only they were brave enough to let someone in. Years after both Zachary and Tessa had passed, their great-granddaughter found a bundle of letters in an old trunk, correspondence between the couple during the brief times they had been separated over their long marriage. She read through them with tears streaming down her face, amazed by the tenderness and passion that still echoed through the faded ink. One letter in particular stood out, written by Zachary to Tessa during his trip to Kansas to see his dying brother. "My dearest Tessa, I am sitting by the fire tonight, missing you with an ache that physical distance cannot begin to explain. I find myself thinking about the day we met, about how close I came to dying in those mountains, about how your stubbornness and skill brought me back from the edge. I think about how I tried to leave after I recovered, and how you gave me permission to go, but somehow made me want to stay. I think about how you looked at me like I was worth saving, worth knowing, worth loving, even when I was convinced I was none of those things. You changed everything, my love. You took a man who was more ghost than human and reminded him what it meant to be alive. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose beyond mere survival. You gave me joy. I know I do not always have the words to express what I feel, but I want you to know that every day I wake up beside you is a gift I never expected to receive. Every moment we share is precious beyond measure. I will love you until my last breath. And if there is anything beyond this life, I will love you there too. Yours always, in this world and the next, Zachary." The great-granddaughter carefully preserved the letters, understanding they were more than just words on paper. They were proof that love, true love, could survive anything. That two people could find each other in the most unlikely circumstances and build something that would last for generations. The old Irving homestead still stood on the outskirts of what had become a much larger Seligman, preserved by the family as a reminder of where they had come from. Visitors could see the cabin Zachary had built, could stand on the porch where he and Tessa had watched countless sunsets, could imagine what life had been like in those early days when the West was still wild and two damaged people had found healing in each other. The story of the mountain man and the nurse who saved him became a touchstone for the Irving family, passed down through the generations. It was a reminder that strength came in many forms, that love was worth fighting for, that second chances should never be taken for granted. It was a legacy not of wealth or fame, but of character and commitment and the choice to build something meaningful from the ashes of loss. And so the story ended not with death, but with life. With the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward the values Zachary and Tessa had lived by. With the community they had helped build. With the love they had shared so generously that it overflowed to touch everyone around them. It was the perfect ending to an imperfect story, which was perhaps the most perfect thing about it. Because life is not neat or tidy or simple. Love is not easy or guaranteed or without pain. But when you find the right person, when you commit to showing up day after day, when you choose to build something together despite the odds, something extraordinary can emerge. Zachary Irving had stumbled onto Tessa Langford's doorstep, bleeding and dying, with nothing to offer but a body full of wounds and a heart that had forgotten how to hope. She had dragged him inside, stitched him back together, and refused to let him slip away into the darkness. And in return, he had given her the one thing she needed most. A reason to keep going, a partner to share the burden, a love that made everything else worthwhile. They had saved each other. And in doing so, they had created something that would outlast them both. A family, a legacy, a story worth telling. That, in the end, was their true triumph. Not that they survived, though they did. Not that they loved, though they loved fiercely. But that from the desperate collision of two broken lives, they had built something whole, something lasting, something that proved even in the harshest landscape, even in the most difficult circumstances, even when all hope seemed lost, human connection could prevail. The mountain man and the nurse, the patient who refused to leave, the woman who refused to let him go. Two people who found each other at death's edge and chose life. Together. It was a story as old as time and as fresh as morning. A love story set against the wild backdrop of the American West, where survival was never guaranteed and tomorrow was never promised, where two people could meet by chance and change each other's lives forever. And somewhere, perhaps in whatever comes after this life, Zachary and Tessa Irving were together still, watching over the family they had created, the legacy they had built, the love that had started with desperate salvation and grown into something eternal. Together at last, forever, in the way that only true love can promise. Together in a bond that death itself could not break. Because some connections run deeper than flesh and bone, deeper than time and circumstance, all the way down to the soul. That was their story. That was their gift to the generations that followed. The knowledge that love, real love, can transform everything. That broken people can heal. That second chances are worth taking. And that sometimes, the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. From stumbling across a threshold half dead into the arms of someone stubborn enough to refuse to let you go. The end of their earthly story was simply the beginning of their legend. A testament to the power of human connection and the stubborn refusal to give up on someone worth saving. And in the hearts of everyone who heard their story, who was inspired by their example, who chose to love a little harder because of them, Zachary and Tessa Irving lived on. Forever together, forever an example of what it means to truly save someone and be saved in return.